Hello, welcome back to the Cricket Nerds. It's been a while, but when we saw the news from the ICC that they were proposing a two-tier World Test Championship system setup thing, we kind of thought, right, this is the time. We've got to have a chat. The people need to hear the opinion of two absolute idiots. One with an absolutely shambolic moustache, another that has fled to the other side of the world. So, Zach, you are currently in New Zealand, are you not?
I am, yes. It's lovely here. However, I did miss out on the England-New Zealand Test match series. Um, Sadly, in the Cricket Nerds, we don't do that sort of thing at the moment. But maybe one day, who knows?
Yeah, we're
But
not
it
quite
has
there
been
yet.
difficult to no.
But
It
you
has been
were.
difficult to organise one, hasn't it? Because of distance and everything. But
It has, yeah.
yeah,
It's been a driving factor to the pretty shambolic schedule uploads. So yeah, we've kind of we've been struggling to find times that work because time zones and stuff. But there we go.
mm,
Um, Now you were in Australia during the Border Gavaskar Trophy.
I
Did
was.
you went to the first game, didn't you?
I went to the first day of the first Test match in Perth. Yeah, it was
Which
awesome.
that
Really
was
cool.
potentially the best spell of bowling that there's ever been from Jasprit
Yeah,
Bumrah, right?
yeah, it
How
was
was that?
unplayable. Yeah, he just looked on a different level. Just the awkward bounce that he creates. And yeah, is I think everyone bowled well that day. And Rishabh Pant did like an insane reverse scoop pull shot that was incredible to watch. So yeah, it was a really good day of watching Test match cricket. Lots of wickets fell, so very exciting. But I think in on a whole, watching the series after that day, it has been a really good event for Test cricket.
Mm,
People are saying, "Oh, maybe BGT is the next Ashes, or is it even better than the Ashes because of the level of competition?" Because let's face it, England generally don't do well when they visit Australia, whereas
yeah.
India have done. And yeah, it was an awesome series. I think it's just because they proposed this new World Test Championship model of having maybe two tiers for Test cricket, and when you see the best teams playing against the best teams, it does provide that extra level of excitement, extra level of competitism. Is that a word? Competitism?
Competition,
I don't know. Competition, competitiveness,
competitiveness. Yeah,
competitism. A new
yeah,
word created
competitism.
by the
Yeah.
cricket nerds. Yeah. um, so yeah, it's just creates a great advert for the game. Whereas if you're seeing someone like I don't know New Zealand playing Zimbabwe, you know that New Zealand are probably going to win, and Zimbabwe might not put up much of a fight. But then you see Zimbabwe versus Afghanistan, and that's been great to watch because you've got two teams similar sort of ability, and yeah, it's creating a good spectacle for the game. So that for me is positives for this proposed model. There's probably more. Do you want to keep going with them?
No, because I land more on the negative side. So I'm
Well,
happy
there we
to
go.
circle back to some positives if you can think of any more.
Yeah.
But let's talk negatives because ultimately it does pretty much screw over the teams that get stuck in tier two. And one of the biggest is West Indies, who and I say biggest because of their cricketing heritage, because of their test heritage. It was only a few decades ago that they were the best team and they were absolutely unplayable. Um, and to see them be called, the sort of tier two side, it's I'll tell you why it annoys me, right? If we think about if this was the Olympics, okay, and the Olympics give a few nations springs in their shoes, and then they say, right, okay, compete in the high jump, and the nations that have the springy shoes do way better. And one year, the Olympic Committee goes, look, guys, the level of competition between some of these nations just isn't good enough. So we're going to have a two-tier system in the Olympics,
Yeah.
and it just so happens that all the teams with the springy shoes get put in tier one, and all the teams without them get put in tier two. That is how I see this, because the ICC are treating the symptoms, not the cause. They're looking at the fact that, oh, well, there are teams that are doing a lot better, they're a lot stronger, and there are teams that are a lot weaker. So let's split them up. But why? What's your root cause analysis for this? What is the reason for them not doing as well? And I think a lot of it is down to the funding. A lot of it is down to the structures that have got in place and the inequality in the way that it's spread, or maybe the equality in the way that it's spread is wrong. Because if you do it purely on the proportion that you're bringing in, then yeah, sure, India have 90% of it because that's where all the TV rights are. Sound.
Yeah.
India can play their own team then. Like they have India A versus India B for the rest of Test cricket. That's what it ultimately comes down to. So like India, Australia, England are kind of the ones that have been proposing this. Big surprise because they bring in the most money and they get the most money in return. But if you're not going to invest in your competition, if you're not going to invest in your opposition, which cricket's in this weird space where it has to, then the game's going to die because not every team plays it. It just so happens that pretty much every team that plays it was in the British Empire at one time. Okay, that's the reality of the situation.
It's Commonwealth, isn't it?
It's Commonwealth teams, and it's an amazing sport, but it is only played by a handful of countries. And if you start sort of in a systematic way promoting this inequality of funding and resources, where you have sort of three nations that are absolutely at the top and they're doing amazingly in terms of just wealth and being able to plow money into grassroots and stuff, and then you just hang the others out to dry, then you're going to end up with this system that we have now. And I don't see this being the right route to solving that. That's a big old monologue from me. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think because you're providing your view, I feel like I need to provide the opposite. But to caveat
it's
that,
okay if you agree. Like,
no, I do agree, but I do think it's worth giving other sides to it because, like, take the county championship as an example. The county championship used to be one big division of 18 teams, and then I think it was like the early 2000s maybe. They decided to switch to the two tiers, Division 1, Division 2, and it did provide a greater level of competition. But what we have seen is that there are some counties who have more of an influence. You can see that in the 100 as an example. So they proposed a city model for the 100, and it meant that the Trent Rockets, as an example, play at Trent Bridge, which is Nottinghamshire County Cricket Club's home ground. But the Trent Rockets is supposedly made up of Nottingham, Derby, and Leicester, and Northamptonshire, I think, the East Midlands teams. I could be wrong about that. But what it means is that you've got one county gets all the bigger resources. They're a test match ground. They get that more support. And it's similar for test match cricket, where you've got teams like India, Australia, England. They've got the most money. They get the most test matches. They probably get the most support at those test matches. So they're more likely to have the funds to be able to keep getting better while the poorer teams get poorer, I guess. And we have seen a similar thing in the county system where teams like Nottinghamshire generally consistently in Division 1, whereas teams like Leicestershire and Derbyshire generally stick in Division 2. But that isn't to say that teams with less money aren't able to succeed and find ways to still fund the game and still find ways to produce excellent test cricketers. And I'm thinking about New Zealand as an example. New Zealand are consistently performing well. You've seen how they've gone to India, a country with more than 10 times the amount of people. They've got more than 10 times the amount of money going into their game, and yet New Zealand have gone to India and won 3-0. And it's very impressive. So having the two-tier system means that you don't get those shocks. If we had the two-tier system, we wouldn't have seen West Indies beat Australia in Australia. So for me, that's the negative. So I would what I would want to see is I think the two-tier system has its benefits, but you still need to see teams from tier 2 playing teams from tier 1 in one way or another. And also, you'd want to make sure that they'd have an even amount of matches per series as well. Because what we're seeing is teams like, and this can't be changed in straight away. I understand it because of who watches the game, but teams like England and India will play in 4 or 5 test match series against other teams similar, whereas teams like Afghanistan, Zimbabwe, Ireland, they only play in 1 or 2 match series. So that's not going to help the growth of the game or get into a series. So,
and
that's my take.
The thing is, like, you kind of have to, you look at it in a cricketing sense, and you look at it in a business sense. And from a business standpoint, it makes way more sense to have almost, I mean, to be honest, it probably makes more sense to bin off the other nations, the ones that don't get that much support, certainly in Test cricket, and just to say, look, all we want to see is England versus India versus Australia versus New Zealand, and South Africa and Pakistan and Sri Lanka, sure, and that's what we want to see. That's it. Don't care about anything else, because that's what brings in the money. And certain terms of, like, you look at I guarantee you look at the attendance difference between England versus India in this upcoming summer, in the English summer, and England versus Zimbabwe, which I think is their first fixture in the summer. It'll be stark differences. It'll be crazy.
Yeah.
But and so that makes sense from the business standpoint. You're getting way more money through the door, and then you can argue that you can then reinvest that into the game. However, you can't reinvest it into after you've killed the passion for cricket in a country. And I think that's what it might do if you make it into a two-tier system, because, like you say, it then means that a country like the West Indies, they don't get to face England or Australia or India in a test match, and that's awful. Like, that's so damaging, because England touring to the West Indies is a massive influx in cash in their economy. In obviously there's the tourism side, but also just getting money in the gates. So I think without that, it makes a big difference and a negative impact. So I just think they need to invest way more into those countries that aren't as big in Test cricket or are struggling a little bit more in Test cricket, so that they then can afford to do they can afford to have at least a 3-match series. Ireland versus wherever, Bangladesh. That can be a 3-match series in Ireland, and it doesn't matter if it runs at a loss in the actual games, because the ICC have funded cricket development in that country. It means all the players, they get that test experience. It means that there are 3 opportunities for the local people of Ireland to potentially go to a game that, if you're running it at a loss anyway, you might as well sell the tickets really cheap. Say, I don't know, €10 per seat. And you say, right, let's try and flood the gates if we can, get people actually interested in this sport. And then who knows, it might grow from there. You get more people in grassroots. That's what I'd do. But I'm not Jay Shah. So last time I checked anyway. So, I can spout all I want on YouTube and stuff, but
I mean, we've seen different opinions from different countries. So for example, Clive Lloyd, previous World Cup winning captain of West Indies, has come out and said, I'm not a fan of it. And you understand it, because West Indies have such a proud cricketing history, and a big cricketing history. And you mentioned earlier the fact that they were unbeatable for a good number of years. And teams like that are thinking, well, if you just shove us into a 2nd-tier division, we're never going to get back up to that top division. We're never going to get back to that glory that we had. And I understand that point of view. And then you've got someone like Ireland, who are relatively new cricketing nation, very new to Test cricket, and you've got them put in this 2nd division, and they're happy with that. They think it's good, because I just think about when England last went to Australia for the Ashes, and you saw the massive gulf between the two teams at that time. And as a fan watching a 5 test match series, watching your team just get absolutely pummeled every single time, it's not a good feeling. When you think about Ireland, how well Ireland did in that first test match against England at Lords in the first innings, but then England would just pull themselves together, and there was no way that Ireland were going to win that test match. And so I can see it from Ireland's perspective. But I'd be interested to understand what Bangladesh think, because Bangladesh have consistently been toward the bottom of the table for as long as they played cricket, but their nation absolutely loves cricket. So I don't think Bangladesh really care who they play against. They just want to see Test cricket being played. So yeah, I'm interested.
I think there's two sides to that, because I think you're right.
Yeah.
They want to see Test cricket. Like Bangladesh, again, that's an issue with kind of and I don't know anything about Bangladeshi politics or anything like that, but it seems more like a sort of an infrastructure level, and you know, kind of management level issues that they have there. The fact that Shakib Al Hassan has been in and out of like captaincy and then being kicked out of the squad, that kind of summarizes what Bangladesh cricket, like the main problem with it is. And yeah, I think, you know, you say it doesn't matter who they play against, but I guarantee that Bangladeshi fans, you know, that they'll love cricket. They want to see Virat Kohli nicking off fifth stump line to the fizz. Like that's what they want to see. Sorry to our Indian fans, that's probably a little bit of a cheap blow, but it's a cheap wicket. So
we just lost 20 subscribers, Jake.
It's I think that's the kind of difference it makes, is, you know, people want to see those big players. Like if you think of it from just our perspective, like if you want to get me to a test match in England, I am much more likely to go and buy a ticket if I know that I'm going to see Jasprit Bumrah or Shaheen Shah Afridi or you know, Shamar Joseph. Like I want to see these exciting players, and you know, as good as Mark Adair and Josh Little are, it's not as exciting. So I think you need to improve those. You need to allow for that development, so that, you know, suddenly Ireland become like a bit of a threat, a bit of, you know, not just the kind of the warm up test. They become like a decent event, 3-match series. Let's crack on kind of thing.
I think what you're getting to is, if there's a 2-tier system, there needs to be the stuff in place so that there is the ability for those teams in the second division to come up to the first division.
Yeah, there
probably will be promotion and relegation.
Yeah.
But what you don't want to see is just Sri Lanka and Pakistan getting demoted every year, and Bangladesh and West Indies getting promoted every year in the switch. Because that's not going to improve the game. You want to see teams like Afghanistan pushing for that first division, getting into the first division, and almost like doing a Nottingham Forest or a Leicester City, and be then fighting for the title of best test team. That's what you want to see, because the more teams that are at the top, the more exciting cricket's going to be. And that for me is the positive of the 2-tier system. Because if it works, then it's great for the game. If you've got that competition, like in the English Premier League as an example. But it might take a while before we see that, because if West Indies remain in Division 2 and England remain in Division 1, then we're going to struggle to watch the next time England beat West Indies in West Indies.
Yeah,
which is never going to happen.
And, you know,
like, we struggle every time we go there. So
it would just be I think it would just be a shame. And if they're going to do it as an actual, like, you know, an honest approach, instead of it the obvious sort of cash grab that this is, if they actually went into it with the right attitude of, right, we're going to try and make a 2-tier system where there's genuine relegation and promotion, then you'd have equal sized leagues. I would have thought you'd have, you know, an equal number of teams either side. It wouldn't just be, hey, here are all the teams that can afford it, and here are all the teams that can't. And that's how it's split at the moment. And also, if they carry on the way that they're doing with the penalty for slow over rates, then England might end up being in tier 2. You never know.
The most radical suggestions are from Michael Vaughan, which isn't that surprising, to be honest. But he was saying test match cricket, the way it should be going is you should be having a set number of overs in a day that will happen. You've got 4-day test matches. And just he comes up with all these radical suggestions. And somewhere along the line, there has to be some form of balance. But you have to make those decisions to progress the game. The game can't just stay in one place. You can't always be all cricket was great in the 1950s. We need to keep it that way for the rest of time. It's not going to help. So there do have to be the progressions. We just hope that the ICC are thinking of it in a well thought out way, with cricket lovers making these decisions, not people who are just interested in money. Because if your driver is money, not cricket, then it's not going to have a good impact. Whereas if your driver is cricket and this is going to be the best thing for the game, then that will be okay for me.
I think the basis of the cricket nerds philosophy is that T20s and ODIs are brilliant. We love them, and you know, certainly like they're good sort of gateway cricket, if you know what I mean. Like you know, that I'd say an ODI is probably the best spectators form, and apart from like a final day of a test match. I'd say T20 is like the brilliant sort of introductory way to get into cricket. But then once you learn about cricket, you start to know a little bit more about it. You become invested in it. You become obsessed by it. You become a proper cricket nerd. Then test match cricket is like unbeatable because the stakes feel so much higher. You're playing for your spot in history. That's how it always works. Like it's, you know, that the history of the game is probably its biggest strong suit. And I think as soon as you start trying to change it too much, where Michael Vaughan is looking for a headline, let's be honest, he just wants to keep his name out there so he can continue getting jobs. I think there'll be some good ideas that he has, but they'll be in amongst a lot of like, you know, kind of rage bait, clickbait stuff. I just think that there is so much value to the game, and they, like you say, it needs to be cricket lovers that are making these decisions for the good of the game. I personally don't think a 2-tier system is it. I think have a look at the way you're going to split your revenue first, or your profit, whatever you're going to call it. How is the ICC funding divided up? Because let's be completely honest now, and I don't care what, you know, speaking to the viewer here, I don't care what team you support, which team you support. You know that India and England and Australia, they don't really need the money from the ICC. Like, yeah, you know, they'll have their issues. There's, you know, I know from an English fan's point of view, there's plenty of counties that are not that well funded and stuff. So you think, oh, well, the ECB need more money, whatever. But realistically, no, like it's just not an issue. India have got so much money coming in from that IPL that the ICC is a drop in the ocean. So why not invest in your future competition? You know, if you just instantly tripled the amount that West Indies, Ireland, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, all of them get, Afghanistan, a bit weird with the whole politics thing, we'll leave that. But the rest of them, if you just instantly tripled it, imagine the kind of setups that they could get. Imagine the kind of players that they could bring in. And in 5-10 years' time, think of the level of competition you could have. And that's the direction I think it could go, and hopefully will. But
we
as
want
always,
to see.
Oh, go on.
I was just saying we want to see, because we've seen England saying, "Oh, when we go to Australia, we're preparing for the Ashes. We're preparing to win down under." We want to see teams like Ireland, Afghanistan. We want to see them planning that way as well.
Yeah, I want to hear the trash talk. I want to hear Paul Sterling being like, "Look, I've been working on a new delivery, right? A new off spinner that's going to get Ben Stokes out every time." That's what I want to hear. And that's what we could get. So, as always, we're really interested to know what you guys think. So, if you have any thoughts, please leave them in the comments down below. If you've watched this far, thank you very much. leave a comment that says James's mustache is awful if you have watched this far, because then we'll know that you're a real one. And I will take the hint and maybe get rid of it. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for the continued support. Realize it's been quite a long time since our last video. But yeah, cheers.